The next scheduled speaker was Barbara Mellers, and unfortunately couldn't be here for health reasons. And she's part of the Good Judgment Project, along with Lyle, who's kindly agreed to step in and present her paper. And Lyle will be followed by Lyle himself presenting the paper he was scheduled to present. So Lyle is professor of computer and information sciences at the University of Pennsylvania. He also holds an appointment in the psychology department. Let me just, without further ado, turn it over to Lyle.
Good. Can we get, I could get our slides. There we go. Microphone live? Good. Thanks for the intro. Jason reminds me of Niels Bohr, who also is said to have said that it's hard to make accurate predictions, particularly about the future. So we like to talk about that. So I'm going to start with presenting a set of work with the team Good Judgment. There's a large chunk of people on the team, and Barb, there she is, at least virtually, couldn't be here, but I will do my best to channel her wisdom. So, background should be obvious, but we'd like to make predictions about geopolitical events, what's happening in the world. Making predictions is hard. Things vary from relatively predictable, if you have good physics, hard to predict, and even harder to predict. And in particular, if you look at geopolitical events, there are some cases where you might make false positives. You miss big events you should have found. There are some cases you find things that aren't there. And I'm told that the prediction that Obama was given about Osama being where he was alleged to be was roughly 50-50. There are things in the middle. We would like to help define ways to select people, train people, put them in groups, prediction markets, teams, whatever it is, to come up with better predictions that are more accurate, more calibrated, more on to lead to better decisions. So, the term forecast, which Jason pointed, is ARPA's way to escape a bunch of back and forth on who's responsible for things. A lot of looking after the fact. Again, we're predicting the future, as Jason said, very important. And my feeling there's been a lot of work devoted and money devoted to training projects without any assessment of whether they actually work or don't work. There's a widespread belief in my field that training in statistics doesn't help people do better at estimating probabilities. We'll see what happens. And as Jason said, a level playing field to evaluate people's performance. So I'm going to do one tiny, tiny bit of math, just kind of keep talking about Breyer scores. And all you really need to know is lower is better. But let's go back to metrology, weather forecasting, where people really understand these things. We're going to measure all our forecasting on a scale where we're going to say, give me a probability of rain on some day, 90%, 50, 50, or 80, and it will then, it will either rain or not rain. If you say 90% chance that it does rain, your score is 1 minus 0.9, because it did rain, plus 0 minus 0.1, that's how far off you are on that side, so you did very well. If you guessed 50% chance of rain, it didn't rain, you get a score of 0.5. If you guess an 80% chance of rain and it does rain, you get a 1 minus 0.8 squared plus 0 minus 0.2 squared, and then we average them all up. All you need to remember is lower is better. If you're God, you're omniscient, you get a 0. If you're a monkey throwing darts, you're getting 0.5. And if you're perfectly wrong, you get 2. So lower scores are better. And we're going to average over all days to see for every person, for every event, make a prediction every single day. On average, how well do you do? Make sense? OK, so fun part. So this is a 4-year project. We're just finishing up year 3. Bunch of questions. Who will be the Russian president on some date? Will 300,000 or more refugees leave Syria by some date? Lots of questions. The key is they relate to something someone cares about, and they are falsifiable. We will know the outcome at the end. Cool. Who do we have for this? We recruited a few thousand people from word of mouth and later years from NPR and other stories there. About 75% US, mostly male, mean age of 38, pretty educated. Everyone has at least a bachelor's, 60% have a higher degree. These are pretty high quality people. They logged onto a website. It's all distributed, all asynchronous, all recorded. They make forecasts Hopefully they make good forecasts often. And then the question is, what works? You're assembling a set of people. What should you do? Big enough people to do experiments. We looked at two set of things, one that psychologists call dispositional variables. Sort of a weird thing. What personality traits, intelligence, IQ information. And other ones, what situational variables? Working on teams, working independent. Is groupthink going to be a problem? Are teams going to be better? Does training help? What can we do? So dispositional variables, we gave all our forecasters an extensive battery of tests. By and large, people who are smarter, particularly in fluid intelligence, like ravens, or numeracy skills, do better. People who are more open-minded, willing to think longer, consider alternatives, as measured by psychological tests, were better forecasters. And it helps a bit to know more about the world, politics, some crystallized intelligence. Situational variables were less obvious what's going to matter. One was we tried probability training or forecasting training, about an hour's worth of online work. What does calibration and resolution mean? Some basic definitional terms. A lot of work on base classes. What's a comparable event you should be comparing this to? Some basic rules about statistics, some simple models, mostly just things that one should know about forecasting and probability. So we gave that to some set and not to others. We also tried teams. Now our teams are roughly 20 people that work together as they see fit. They do not give a single forecast. Each person on the team gives their own forecast. There's no forcing of agreement. But on the leaderboard, you see how your team did. You're encouraged to make your team perform well and to help your other buddies. You seem to have misunderstood the question. Maybe you meant that. Did you see this later article in the New York Times? I think it pushes that. No, the European Union can't do that. They're never that fast. Trust me, I worked with them. Whatever you think, it's going to take longer, okay? So what do we have? Trying to see how much do these different pieces affect things. So this piece of the experimental design, we'll come to later more big ones. Everybody gets given a bunch of tests. Psychology, battery of tests like Raven's IQ test. We randomly assign them to training or no training. We then randomly sub-assign them to work individually or in teams. Right? So we got a 2x2 matrix I'm going to talk about now. What happens? Well, overall, training helps for individual people and training helps for teams. Oh, it's Breyer score. Lower is better. That was the whole point of that digression before. Lower is better. Training helps both individuals and teams do significantly better than individuals. No groupthink. Maybe because these teams are distributed, you can't see status, you can't see who has the high tie on and who's male or female. Males and females are indistinguishable, by the way, in our sample. We can't see any effect. Diversity of that doesn't seem to matter. So training helps. Teams help. Try to put the whole thing together. This is the one complicated slide in a structural equation model. Looking, the colors aren't coming out very well either. What we have is some of the dispositional variables. Intelligence. A bunch of our measures correlate with IQ, with intelligence. A bunch of our political tests, knowledge tests, correlate with political knowledge. People with more intelligence have lower Breyer score. They do better. Smarter people do better. People with more knowledge do better. People on teams do better. People with training, the situational variables. People on teams also spend more time looking at questions, and they update their questions more often. The teams are more engaged, and people who spend more time viewing the questions or do more updating, whoops, whoa, come back here, also have lower Breyer scores. So teams help both directly and indirectly by more engagement. Training helps. Actively open-minded thinking, people who are more open by our test that John Barron made to accepting new ideas do better. Make sense? So there's one other piece I wanted to talk about that was surprisingly effective. We took the top 1% of the performers in year one, and we put them on their own super teams. We said, you are super forecasters. You guys are awesome. You're the top 1%. You're going to work well. And they worked really well. So the Breyer scores Independent, no training. Independent with training. Teams, no training. Teams, training. Super forecasters. These guys kick butt. Really good. I want to spend the rest of this 20 minutes telling you how good they are and some idea of maybe why they're so good. So these guys are really good. To do this, I'll compare against two base groups. We'll compare about the ones that were also on teams but not super teams, people who were in the second 2%, not the top 1%, but the next 1%. Almost as good. With me? They'll be in red, super forecasters will be in blue, and then a benchmark of everybody who will be in green, just the overall base rate. So the first thing you worry about is regression to the mean. Sure, they were good the first year, but are they good the second year? So again, these are Breyer scores, standardized, but again, lower is better. The super forecasters got better in the next 2 years rather than regressing to the mean. They improved further, diverged more. The top team individuals, the 1% below them, did in fact regress to the mean. And the overall people got a little bit worse relatively too. So no regression to the mean. The supers got better with more experience. It wasn't just coincidence we found them. They're reliably good. Top guy from last year, 1 or 2 the next year. These guys are awesome. So why are they so good? Well, one more thing there. They had also faster rates of learning. If I make a baseline over the tournament, the green being the everybody average, the 2% people got better over time. The super forecasters learned even more and improved even further. So these guys, again, didn't regress. They got better with experience, better there. So why are they so good? Partly the dispositional variables. They were, in fact, smarter. They had a somewhat more scientific worldview. Interestingly, if you look at their probabilities, typical people say, oh, it's 0.7, it's 0.8, it's 0.9. These guys, 0.92, 0.935. They're using finer grain probability scales. They're thinking more carefully about it. They're taking a broader scope. They're bringing in more information. They're doing more sharing. They view, we have all the transcripts from them. We have all their conversations. We read them all. They know that. It's approved. They're a lot more engaged. They view this as a learning experience. They do postmortems. They meet together. They talk to each other. Say, what did we do wrong last time? How did we miss that? Was it just bad luck? Are we doing well there? They do much more updating of their beliefs. They do more information search. So they're more roped in. And they write a lot more comments. I won't read all these things, but lots more engagement. So in retrospect, maybe it's obvious. Take a bunch of really smart people, put them, I was going to say in a room together, but on the internet together. They goad each other on. They give each other tips. They write software for each other to help process stuff. There's a tremendous synergy as they excite each other and train each other. I think one of the reasons our training worked, so I'm astounded in general that an hour of online training leads to year-long benefits in prediction accuracy. But I think part of the reason it works is the feedback. You make 50 forecasts. You see how well you did or didn't do. You get to use the training. But when you have teams and teams with smart people, they say, hey, you didn't forecast on that problem. Were you OK last week? They say, oh, maybe you should have considered this. I think you made the wrong comparison class. So these people are training each other. Really very much a synergistic. So closing points, first of all, the good people really are better than the not so good people. There is, in fact, skill there. Secondly, what works? Picking the right people, training them, putting them on teams, very important. And having super teams really does a big boost over those. Final closing points. We really found that there's a multi-pronged approach here that really is a question of picking people who are, in fact, better in some measurable intelligence, open-minded thinking, group interaction pieces there. But training in teams is equally important, if not more. And these super forecasters really worked well. And when I think about this approach, I don't think there's anything magical about geopolitical forecasting. I think it's probably, but I'd love to test this, true that in lots of forecasting domains, the same sort of approach should work. the same type of selecting people, putting on them groups, getting them more engaged and training them. And so I look forward to seeing how that all pans out. Thank you.